Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. Today we come to the Gospel of John, which is my personal favorite because it's just like the most personal look at Jesus. And that's because this is written by one of Jesus' closest friends. Maybe a better way to put it is that Jesus was John's best friend. But just like the others, let's ask the question, do we have any real evidence that that guy is the author of this fourth Gospel? The early church tells us that after Jesus' mother Mary died, John lived in Asia Minor, overseeing the seven churches there, with Ephesus as kind of his home base. And it was there that he wrote this gospel and the three epistles that were also later in the New Testament, before he eventually died around the age of 100 during the reign of Emperor Trajan. This stuff has been universally recognized by the Christian church for couple thousand years, and it wasn't even seriously questioned until the 1700s. But that's also when a man named Nathaniel Lardner comes onto the scene. This guy was the punk rock theologian of his time. Unlike so many of his contemporaries that took the mindset of, it's the Bible, so therefore believe it automatically, he approached things with a very critical and yet fair perspective. He was famous for being a rigorous scholar committed to evidence-based conclusions. Consequently, his writings were highly respected among both believers and skeptics. And in the mid-1700s, he gathered evidence from second-century church leaders like Clement of Rome, Ignatius, and Polycarp, as well as later church fathers like Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Clement of Alexandria. Theophilus of Antioch refers to John's opening line, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God," both affirming the theological emphasis there and specifically attributing it to John. Justin Martyr, in the first half of the 2nd century, doesn't name John specifically, but clearly references his gospel repeatedly. He also quotes John's opening with the Word being made flesh, and he references a couple lines that only appear in the Gospel of John, like John the Baptist in John 1:23 saying, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness," or Jesus saying in John 5:17, "My Father is always working and so am I." Clement of Alexandria explains that John was the last one to write his gospel, specifically providing a more spiritual account that complements the other three gospels, which focus on like the news highlights of Jesus' life and teaching. By the late 2nd century, we have Tertullian explicitly attributing the four gospels to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Just in his writings that survived, he makes 2,500 references to the New Testament, with 700 of those references to the Gospels, and out of that, 200 of them are specifically to John. Tertullian actually quotes from every single chapter of Matthew, Luke, and John. Clement of Alexandria, again, gives the same authors for all four Gospels, although he puts them in a different order. He calls it Matthew, Luke, Mark, John. And even though we don't have nearly as much of his writings as we do from like Tertullian, he still has 320 references to the New Testament. Irenaeus credits the four Gospels to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John also. His works have 1,200 references to the New Testament, 400 are in the Gospels, 80 of which are John. I specifically want to take a look at Irenaeus. He learned Christianity from Polycarp, who was actually a student of John himself. He tells us that Polycarp talked all the time about his interactions with John and others who had actually seen Jesus themselves. So this is a pretty close link. Around the year 175 AD, Irenaeus wrote a book against heresy. That book we still have, and it provides some amazing insight. Just listen to the detail and confirmation. He says, Matthew among the Hebrews published a gospel in their own language while Peter and Paul were preaching the gospel in Rome and founding a church there. After their deaths, Mark, Peter's disciple and interpreter, wrote down what Peter had preached. Luke, the companion of Paul, recorded the gospel Paul preached. Later, John, the Lord's disciple who leaned on his breast, published his gospel while living in Ephesus in Asia. He goes on from there to describe the distinct focus of each gospel. Matthew emphasizes Christ's human lineage, so it starts out with, "This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of David and Abraham." Mark begins with a prophetic spirit, saying, "This is the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. It began just as the prophet Isaiah had written." Luke's gospel is priestly in nature, so it starts with Zacharias the priest offering incense. And the Gospel of John declares Christ's divine origin, stating, "In the beginning the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him." John's gospel is sometimes called the supplementary gospel because it fills in a lot of details that weren't covered by the other three. Things like Jesus' early visits to Jerusalem, his very first miracle, a lot of his interactions with close friends. Even in stories that exist in other gospels, John gives us unique details, often focusing on why someone said or did something. John also had a very specific purpose. He was writing to counteract the false teaching of his time known as Gnosticism that denied Jesus being God and man. And so John focused a lot on Jesus' divinity. We get extended accounts of the crucifixion and resurrection. And most notably, John includes the miracle of raising Lazarus, which critics used to question due to the absence in the other Gospels. But scholars suggest Lazarus may have still been alive when those ones were written, which would make it dangerous to mention him due to political threats. But John's Gospel was written so much later that Lazarus was already dead by then. So John could share this amazing miracle highlighting Jesus' power over death. Just like he said in John 11:25-26, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. This is what John wanted us to know, that Jesus is God. Jesus came to us, and he has the power over death, which is why he's still alive today, and he wants to give you life as well. That is the life-changing truth John wants you to know.